In 2006, a 911 dispatcher in rural Oregon picked up a call that should not have been possible. The line was old, scratchy, like something transmitted through decades of static and rust. And on the other end, a woman's voice. Calm, quiet, repeating the same address over and over again. 142 Harrow Mill Road. 142 Harrow Mill Road. Please. He's still in the house. The dispatcher traced the call. Sent a unit out immediately. When officers arrived at that address, they found nothing. No house. No woman. No sign that anyone had been there in years. Just an empty field. Overgrown. Forgotten. But here's the part that nobody could explain. In the county records, there was a missing persons report filed at that exact address. On that exact date, 44 years earlier, 1962, a woman named Evelyn Marsh had called for help. And nobody came. What you are about to hear is the full story of the 911 call from 1962. A story about a woman who vanished, a call that traveled through time, and a question that law enforcement in Harrow County, Oregon has never been able to answer. Who was still calling for help? And why did it take 44 years for anyone to listen? Stay with me, because this one is going to get under your skin. Harrow County, Oregon. Population just under 6,000 people. It sits about 40 miles southeast of Eugene, tucked between the Cascade foothills and a stretch of dense Pacific Northwest forest that locals have called the Dark Timber since anyone can remember. Not because anything particularly sinister happened there. Just because the trees grow so thick and so tall that even on a clear summer afternoon, the forest floor stays dark. It is the kind of place that does not show up on most maps. The kind of place where people move to disappear, or where they are simply born and never leave. A few farms. A grain elevator. A diner called Patsy's that has been serving the same coffee and the same pie since 1971. A volunteer fire department. A sheriff's office with 6 full-time deputies covering an area the size of a small European country. In 2006, the Harrow County Sheriff's Department received an average of 12 to 15 emergency calls per day. Fender benders on Route 58. Domestic disputes. The occasional drunk and disorderly outside the 2 bars on Main Street. Medical emergencies at the trailer parks out on the county line. Nothing that would make the news. Nothing that anyone outside Harrow County would ever care about. Until the night of September 14, 2006. Dispatcher Renee Calloway had been working the overnight shift for 11 years. She knew every voice that called in. She knew which farmers called about fence damage just to have someone to talk to. She knew which addresses meant trouble. She had heard everything, or so she thought. At 2:47 in the morning, the board lit up with an incoming call. She picked up. And the world she thought she understood shifted under her feet. The line was terrible. Old telephone line quality, she said later. Like calling through a tin can on a string. There was a hiss underneath everything. A low, constant crackle that she had never heard on a modern line. And then the voice. Female. Adult. She sounded maybe mid-30s, Renee said. Real calm. Too calm. Like she had been waiting a long time for someone to pick up and she was not going to waste a single second of it. The woman said, 142, Harrow Mill Road. Please. He is still in the house. 142, Harrow Mill Road. Renee asked for her name. The woman either did not hear her or did not answer. She just kept repeating the address. Over and over. The same words. The same tone. Perfectly controlled. Like a person who knew that panic would not help her. 142, Harrow Mill Road. Please. He is still in the house. The call lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Then the line went dead. Renee dispatched Deputy Carl Watts immediately. He was the closest unit, about 8 miles out on Route 58. She told him there was a possible domestic situation or home invasion at 142 Harrow Mill Road. Female caller. Distressed but controlled. Unknown number of occupants. Deputy, what's New Harrow Mill Road? Everybody in the county knew it. It was a 2-lane track that ran about 3 miles off the main highway, cutting through the dark timber before dead-ending at what used to be farmland back in the 40s and 50s. Nobody lived out there anymore. The last farmstead on Harrow Mill Road had been abandoned sometime in the 70s. He radioed back to Renee. Asked her to confirm the address. She confirmed it. He told her there was nothing out there. She told him she knew, but he needed to go anyway. He got there at 3:19 in the morning. He described what he found like this. He said, "I pulled up to where the address would have been and I sat in my unit for a minute just looking. There was nothing there. No structure. No foundation. No driveway. Just a field that had been growing wild for God knows how long. Blackberries. Scotch broom. Some old fence posts still standing, but the wire was long gone." He got out. Walked the field with his flashlight. Called out. No response. He photographed the area and drove back to the station. The call was logged. The report was filed. And for about 2 weeks, that was the end of it. Until Renee could not let it go. Here's what Renee Calloway did on her own time, after her shifts, over the course of the next 3 weeks. She went to the Harrow County Records Office. She asked for everything they had on 142 Harrow Mill Road going back as far as they had records. What she found made her sit down in the middle of the records office and not move for a very long time. 142 Harrow Mill Road had been the address of a farmstead owned by a man named Douglas Marsh. He had purchased the property in 1951 and moved there with his wife, Evelyn Marsh, and their young daughter, Clara, who was 4 years old at the time. Douglas Marsh worked the land. Kept to himself. The neighbors, what few there were out on Harrow Mill Road in those days, described him as quiet. Kept his fences up. Paid his bills. Went to church on the first Sunday of every month and sat in the back pew and left before the final hymn. Nobody really knew Evelyn. She did not come to town much. When she did, she was polite but brief. She had dark circles under her eyes. She was thin in the way that people get thin when they're not eating right or not sleeping right. The women at the church tried to include her in their circles. She always had a reason she could not make it. In the summer of 1962, a neighbor named Harold Birch, whose property ran along the eastern edge of the Marsh farm, noticed something. He had not seen Evelyn Marsh in 6 weeks. He had seen Douglas. Douglas was out in the fields every day, same as always. Douglas was fine. But Evelyn was nowhere. Harold Birch was the kind of man who minded his own business. He was a farmer. He had his own problems. But 6 weeks was a long time, and he had a wife named Ruth who told him flat out that something was not right and he needed to say something. So Harold Birch drove to the Harrow County Sheriff's Department on August 19, 1962, and told Deputy Sheriff Roy Ackerman what he had told his wife. He had not seen Evelyn Marsh in 6 weeks. Deputy Ackerman drove out to 142 Harrow Mill Road. Douglas Marsh met him at the door. He was calm. Pleasant, even. He told Deputy Ackerman that Evelyn had gone to stay with her sister in Medford. She had not been feeling well. The city air would do her good. He expected her back before the end of September. Deputy Ackerman asked for the sister's name and phone number. Douglas Marsh gave him a name. Margaret Holloway. And a number. Ackerman called the number from the station. A woman answered. Said she was Margaret Holloway. Said yes, Evelyn was there. Said she was resting and could not come to the phone, but that she was doing much better and expected to be home soon. Case closed. Evelyn Marsh was never seen again. Her daughter Clara grew up. She was raised by her father. She left Harrow County at 17 and never came back. By 1962, the missing persons case for Evelyn Marsh had never been officially opened because as far as the sheriff's department was concerned, she had not gone missing. She had gone to Medford. In 1971, Douglas Marsh sold the property and moved away. Nobody knew where. In 1978, the farmhouse burned to the ground. County records listed it as an accidental fire. The land was never rebuilt on. And by 2006, when Renee Calloway sat in that records office with a file folder on her lap and her hands not quite steady, Evelyn Marsh had been gone for 44 years. And nobody had ever really looked for her. Now here's where this story gets complicated. And I need you to stay with me because the details matter. The phone call that came in on September 14, 2006, was traced by the county's dispatch system to a landline number. Standard procedure. Every incoming call gets a number attached to it automatically. The number that came up was a Harrow County exchange. Old format. The kind of format that had not been used in Oregon since the mid-1960s. When the phone company ran the number through their system, they found that it had been disconnected and retired from service in 1964. The number had belonged to Douglas Marsh. It had been the phone number at 142 Harrow Mill Road. The line had been dead for 42 years. I want you to think about that for a second. A call came in on a line that had been disconnected 42 years earlier, from an address where no structure had existed for nearly 30 years. And the voice on that call was asking for help from something that, according to all available evidence, had happened in 1962. Deputy Sheriff Carl Watts, who by this point had become deeply invested in what Renee was uncovering, reached out to the phone company's technical team. He wanted to know if there was any explanation. Equipment malfunction. A crossed line. Some kind of freak atmospheric condition that could carry an old signal. The technical team said they had no explanation. They said it was not possible. And yet the call was in the log. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. 2:47 a.m. September 14, 2006. The audio recording was right there in the system. Renee had heard it herself. What happened next is where the investigation, such as it was, started to fall apart. Because Renee Calloway was a 911 dispatcher. She was not a detective. She was not authorized to open a missing persons investigation on a woman who had disappeared 44 years ago based on a phone call that the phone company said was technically impossible. She brought everything she had found to Sheriff Dale Odom. She laid it all out. The records. The old missing persons inquiry that had never become an official case. The phone number. The timeline. All of it. Sheriff Odom listened. He was a careful man. 22 years in law enforcement. He did not dismiss what she was telling him. But he also told her, very gently, that there was nothing he could officially do with a call from a disconnected line as the basis for reopening a 44-year-old case. He did, however, make some calls of his own. He reached out to the Oregon State Police Cold Case Unit. He reached out to the county's Historical Records Department. And he reached out to a woman named Patricia Voss, who was a retired forensic investigator and had spent 15 years working missing persons cases for the state. Patricia Voss agreed to look at everything informally. Off the books. On her own time. What she found over the next 4 months would either explain everything or explain nothing, depending on how you look at it. Patricia Voss started with Evelyn Marsh. She wanted to know who this woman actually was before she disappeared into the story that Douglas Marsh had written for her. Evelyn Louise Marsh, born Evelyn Louise Carver, on March 3, 1928, in Roseburg, Oregon. She was the second of 3 children. Her father worked at a lumber mill. Her mother took in laundry. Evelyn was described by the people who knew her as a girl as bright, funny, stubborn in the best way. She did well in school. She wanted to be a teacher. She met Douglas Marsh at a dance in 1948. She was 20 years old. He was 27. They were married within the year. People who had known Evelyn before the marriage and had occasional contact with her after it described a change that came on gradually and then all at once. She stopped writing letters. She stopped visiting her family. Her sister, a woman named Joan Carver who had moved to Portland, told Patricia Voss in a recorded interview that she had not spoken to Evelyn since 1959, 3 years before she disappeared. Joan said that the last time she saw Evelyn in person was Thanksgiving of 1957. She said Evelyn had a bruise on her jaw that she explained away as walking into a cabinet door. Joan said she knew it was not a cabinet door. But it was 1957 and you did not say certain things out loud in 1957. Patricia Voss tried to find Margaret Holloway, the sister in Medford that Deputy Ackerman had spoken to in 1962. The woman who had confirmed that Evelyn was alive and resting and would be home soon. There was no Margaret Holloway in Medford. Not in 1962. Patricia checked every directory, every record, every archive she could access. There had never been a Margaret Holloway at the address or phone number that Douglas Marsh had provided to the sheriff's department. He had fabricated her entirely. Patricia also found something in the county property records that sent a chill straight through her. When Douglas Marsh sold the property in 1971, he listed the reason for sale as estate settlement. The supporting documentation indicated that his wife, Evelyn Marsh, had died on July 2, 1962. No death certificate had ever been filed with the state of Oregon for Evelyn Louise Marsh. No body had ever been found. No funeral had ever been held. She had simply been declared dead on a property transfer document, quietly, 9 years after she had last been seen alive, and Douglas Marsh had walked away from that land with the proceeds of the sale and vanished into whatever life he had built himself elsewhere. Patricia Voss presented her findings to Sheriff Odom in January of 2007. The case was formally reviewed. The Oregon State Police Cold Case Unit opened a preliminary investigation. A search of the former Marsh property on Harrow Mill Road was authorized. What they found there, beneath 4 decades of wild growth and the ash and debris of a burned farmhouse, was not nothing. Ground-penetrating radar identified 2 areas of disturbed soil in what had once been the farmhouse's root cellar. 2 areas. Not one. Forensic excavation was conducted over 5 days in March of 2007. The remains of a woman were recovered from the first site. DNA testing was conducted. It was a slow process. It took months. In September of 2007, the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the identity of the remains. Evelyn Louise Marsh. Born March 3, 1928. Cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the skull. Manner of death was homicide. She had been in that ground since approximately the summer of 1962. She had never gone to Medford. She had never stayed with her sister. She had never been doing better. She had been dead before Deputy Ackerman ever drove out to that farm. And Douglas Marsh had looked a law enforcement officer in the eye and lied without blinking and walked away free. Now, the question of the second site. The second area of disturbed soil in that root cellar. The forensic team excavated it with the same care as the first. What they found there was not human remains. It was a metal box. Sealed. Corroded from decades underground but still intact. Inside the box were 3 items. A woman's wedding ring. A child's hair ribbon. Yellow. Faded. And a piece of paper, handwritten, in a careful and deliberate script that forensic document examiners determined had been written sometime in the early 1960s. The note said this: "My name is Evelyn Marsh. I live at 142 Harrow Mill Road, Harrow County, Oregon. If anyone finds this, I need you to know that I tried to get help. I called. I do not know if anyone heard me. My daughter Clara is safe. She is with the Birch family next door. Please make sure she stays safe. Please find out what happened to me. Please do not let him say I just went away. I tried to call. Please. Someone please answer. Douglas Marsh was located in 2007. He was living in a retirement community outside Boise, Idaho. He was 79 years old. He had been there for 11 years. He was, by all accounts, a model resident. He helped with the community garden. He attended the weekly card game. He was described by the staff as gentle and quiet and no trouble at all. He was interviewed by Oregon State Police investigators in October of 2007. He was calm throughout. He said he did not remember much about those years. He said Evelyn had left him. He said he had not known what to do. He said he had made mistakes. He did not confess. He was never charged. Oregon's statute of limitations for the filing of murder charges in cases where remains are discovered had expired. The legal landscape around prosecuting a case this old, with this kind of evidence, in this jurisdiction, made a successful prosecution effectively impossible. Douglas Marsh went back to his retirement community. He died in 2011. Heart failure. He was 83 years old. He never answered for what he did to Evelyn. He never answered for what he did to Clara. Clara Marsh, who by 2007 was 60 years old and living in Seattle, was notified of the discovery of her mother's remains. She was given the wedding ring and the hair ribbon and the note. She gave one interview to a local Oregon newspaper in 2008. She said she had always known her mother had not just gone away. She said she had known since she was a little girl. She said her father had told her that her mother had left because she did not love them anymore, and she had believed it the way children believe things when they have no other choice. She said the hardest part was knowing that her mother had tried. That she had called for help. That she had written that note and buried it where someone might find it someday. She said she thought about the 911 call a lot. She said she did not have an explanation for it and she was not going to pretend she did. But she said that whatever it was, whatever had sent that call across 44 years of silence to land on Renee Calloway's board at 2:47 in the morning, she was grateful for it. She said, "My mother was not the kind of woman who gave up. Even after everything, she was still trying to be heard." She said that felt right to her. It felt like her mother. The 911 call from 2006 remains one of the most documented and most unexplained anomalies in Oregon law enforcement history. The recording exists. It has been reviewed by telecommunications experts, paranormal researchers, and law enforcement analysts. Nobody has produced a satisfying technical explanation for how a call was placed and received on a line that had been disconnected for 42 years. The theories range from the technical to the extraordinary. Some investigators believe there was a malfunction in the county's digital routing system that caused an old archive signal to be incorrectly processed as a live incoming call. They cannot explain why that signal would have contained a coherent 4-minute conversation. They cannot explain the voice. They cannot explain the address. Some people believe something else entirely. Renee Calloway retired from the Harrow County Sheriff's Department in 2014 after 20 years of service. She still lives in the county. She has spoken about the call in several interviews over the years. She always says the same thing when people ask her what she believes happened. She says, "I don't know. I have never known. What I know is that I picked up that phone and a woman asked me for help. And this time, someone listened. And Evelyn came home." She pauses when she says that last part. And she does not say anything else. The Harrow Mill Road property was officially designated as an unmarked grave site by Harrow County in 2008. A small marker was placed at the edge of the field. It reads, Evelyn Louise Marsh, 1928 to 1962. She called for help. People leave flowers there sometimes. Mostly women. The flowers are always fresh. I have thought about this story a lot since I first came across it. I have thought about Evelyn in that house. Writing that note. Burying it. Hoping. I have thought about what it takes to stay calm when you are terrified. To keep repeating an address clearly and carefully because you know that panic will not help you. To do everything right and still not be heard. I have thought about Renee Calloway at 2:47 in the morning, picking up a call that should not have existed, doing her job, sending a unit out, pulling on a thread that unraveled 44 years of silence. I do not know what the call was. I do not know how it happened. But I know that Evelyn Marsh wrote a note that said, "Please do not let him say I just went away." And she did not just go away. She is remembered now. And that has to count for something. If this story hit you the way it hit me, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week I go deep on the cases that history tried to forget. The ones that got buried, literally and otherwise. The ones where somebody was still trying to be heard long after the world had stopped listening. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think about the call. Tell me if you believe it. Tell me if you do not. I read every single one. Take care of yourselves out there. And if you ever get a call you cannot explain, pick it up. You never know who needs you to listen.